Peace and blessings, family. This is your brother Asarimhotep with the Martin Delaney Center for Egyptology. And today is Thursday, January 6, 2022. And today's discussion is titled Adam and Eve Was Set Up to Fail, and then subtitled A Modern Example. I will tell you exactly what I mean when we return in just a moment. Welcome to the Mbongi Peace and Blessings family. Hope y'all are doing well today. Shout out to everyone who is catching us live, and then of course those of you who are catching the archives. So as usual, want to shout out those of you who have made themselves known in the chat room. So peace to Sister Tamika, who was here a little early today, and I just got off of work, so that's why it's 15 minutes past the hour. So I wanted to make sure that I had enough time to make it here. And so that's the reason for that. So peace and love to Science Sean in the building. Thank you, and hit the like button. And EJG, aka Shango, is in the building. Omar Reed is in the building. Infinite Minds is in the building. Peace and blessings to you. Jeremy Chapman is in the building. Thank you for joining us. Sister Sylvia Stewart is in the building. Thank you for joining us. That good guy has made it in the building. Not that bad guy, but that good guy. We always love the good brothers and sisters. And Stephen McKenzie has made it in the building. Hotep to you as well. And anybody else who I've missed who's probably on the Facebook channels, which were also simultaneously streaming as well. Peace to Conan Lee, Brother Duarte, Dr. Duarte in the building. Thank each and every one of you for joining the program. And so, as it was mentioned, before I do that, for those of you who follow the channel, you know that this weekend was supposed to be the Restoration of Consciousness weekend. The Hoppy film was to be shown at the Shrine of the Black Madonna, but due to I guess an upsurge in the COVID-19 virus and all other kinds of activities, they have been canceling a number of events across the city, and this one is one as well. So for those of you who were in Houston or coming to Houston, hopefully you get this in time. And if you purchase tickets, I think they already sent you the notification. But for everyone else who may have planned on joining, Dr. Wade Nobles, Professor James Small, Dr. Vera Nobles, Brother Taki Grant, and myself at the Shrine of the Black Madonna this weekend, it has been postponed. And I believe it is postponed for March the 19th and 20th of this year. And so they moved it past the just a little bit beyond the the trip to Africa, the trip to Egypt, that will be happening in February. So when we return back from that trip, a few weeks later, we'll be in Houston, and so make sure that you stay tuned, keep your eyes, excuse me, your ears to the street, and check out hoppyfilm.com for more information regarding the exact dates. But I think that is the date for now. So just to send a reminder to each and every one of you that the event has in fact been postponed. So now, with that said, as mentioned at the beginning of the program, the title of our discussion is Adam and Eve was set up to fail, a modern example. Now, how I've already come to this conclusion, but I saw a TikTok video that I think perfectly explains what was going on in the Bible. And one of the reasons why you have to argue that it is essentially mythology. But y'all know the Adam and Eve story. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and darkness moved upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the faces of the waters. Genesis 1 and 1. Y'all already know that. And then some days later, whether the days are 1,000 years or 7 literal days or 6 literal days, human beings were created. In one story it was human beings in the plural, and then in another story it was Adam, and then later out of his rib comes his counterpart Eve. So we're familiar with that story. So now we know in Genesis that God gave them a commandment that they can eat of every single tree in the garden except the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And then here comes the serpent who beguiles Eve, puts the pimp game on Eve, and she fell for the okey doke and convinced Adam to eat of the tree that they would not die. And then that was supposed to be the beginning of all the woes of human beings, because then man fell and they were kicked out of the garden and all types of trouble uh, from that point on. And so from the biblical tradition, the all human beings from that point on were born into sin. And so for many of you who have known me over the years, know that, of course, I used to be a Hebrew Israelite in the ICUPK, which was then the ISUPK way back in the early 90s. And so a lot of stuff just didn't sit with me after a while. And, eventually I departed ways from the doctrine and then started doing some more serious, heavy studies into, of course, Africana studies and just world history in general. So over time, of course, I abandoned those attachments to the Bible. But one of those critical uh, assessments or analyses of the Bible came in the form of a critique of Genesis. And so, if we want to debunk a lot of what goes later in the Bible, all you don't even have to leave Genesis. Genesis itself gives you plenty of material to debunk most, if not all, of the Bible from that point forward. And so there's some issues which are just on logical grounds, are not salient, and then there's others on historical grounds for which we can make certain types of arguments. But in this sense here, this is one of those logical arguments. And so no, I don't believe that Adam and Eve were real figures. These were concepts mythological anthropomorphic figures to try to explain a number of things, of course, one being, where human beings came from. So, as a scientist, not a biologist, but one who respects the field of biology and looking at all of the evidence, any story, any mythological story, any story in history that argues that, God created a first human being, excuse me, a first man and a first woman, and then all human beings, were birthed from those two, they are all wrong, according to the evidence. The evidence states that we have evolved from, other species, and going all the way back to the single cell amoeba. That's another conversation for another day. But of course, this text here is no different than a lot of stories across the world of that time and beyond. Two human beings were created, a male and female. Well, in the biblical tradition, it was a male, and then the woman was an afterthought. And so when we critically examine the text, we should, in my opinion, come to the logical conclusion that any, let me back up. You should come to the logical conclusion that God set up Adam and Eve to fail. And the reason why I say this is because these individuals who were created essentially to be cattle. And you get this sense when you read the entire text of the Bible. Careful readings will show that any deviation towards knowledge in science was punished in the text. And we see this from the beginning, that God gives them a commandment to not eat of the fruit of the tree, or not to eat the fruit of the tree of knowledge, of the knowledge of good and evil. Now, this is very telling, because one of the things that we know from human experience and just all living organisms is that learning and knowledge comes as a result of growing and developing as human beings. It is experience through time and social interactions, as well as interactions with one's environment, that one learns anything, that one assigns value to experiences, that will tell you whether something is quote unquote good or bad. What is good or bad is really dependent upon the social context in which one lives. Now, this is very important to really kind of grasp and understand, especially when you understand that Adam and Eve were by themselves, at least in one story. They were by themselves. So there's really no culture. There's no culture to tell them what is and what isn't. There is no, now we're to assume that they just had language, right? That they already had an agreed upon system of communicating, where these words mean something in their little language that these two just inherited out of the ethos, right? Or the ether, I should say. And so, but because they did not grow up, we assume that they were adults. Now, but if they had not experienced time, if they had not experienced hardship and failure, if they have never left the garden, they would have no knowledge whatsoever. And so they were children, babies in the mind. And this is, I don't know if y'all have ever tried to speak to babies or how many of y'all watching have children. You know for a fact that when you speak to children, it is like speaking, and I'm talking babies, the ones who have not acquired language yet, that it is like talking to a brick wall. You really can't expect much from the children. They don't understand what you are talking about. So if Adam and Eve were made, but were made like cattle and not to understand and have knowledge of anything, how was God to expect them to follow the commandments? They have no idea of what it means to break a commandment. What is a commandment at this point? What is a rule? What is punishment? How would you know what these concepts are had you not experienced them in some kind of social context? And I'm going to show y'all a video that I downloaded it some months ago, but I've decided to do a show, based on it today, based upon a previous conversation in private. And so I think that this video perfectly, even though it's unrelated to the Bible itself, I think if you see this video, this TikTok video, it will help you to grasp exactly what I'm talking about. And those of you who have pets or those of you who have children understand this completely. So what I'm going to do is I am going to blacken my screen, and then I am going to share the video. So here we go.
You can have fruit snacks, but you can't have them right now, okay?
You gotta wait.
You gotta wait.
Hold on.
Until mom.
Is it showing?
Right now. Can't eat these yet. Get something. Just wait a second.
Hold on. It's not. Well, it's not showing on my screen. Is it showing on yours? It says screen is black. So let me. Here we go. So I'll do that. So I'll start from the beginning. All righty. So y'all can see it. Y'all can see the people now in the chat. Let me know if y'all can. All righty. So Sister Mika says A-OK. And I'm gonna share it now. All righty. So here we go. So I'm sorry because it's a TikTok video. It doesn't share wide. So just hopefully y'all can still see it even though it's a narrow TikTok video. All righty.
Look at me. You can have fruit snacks, but you can't have them right now, okay?
You gotta wait.
You gotta wait until mommy and daddy come back, okay? You can't eat these yet. You gotta wait until we come back. I'm gonna leave them right here. Don't touch them. Wait, okay? We're gonna come back. Don't eat them yet. Don't eat them. We'll be right back. We just gotta go get something. Just wait a second.
I hope y'all were able to see that. Right? And I hope you, so for those who didn't get it, The parents put out some candy and said that you cannot eat this right now. You have to wait until we return. Then you can eat. But as soon as the parents leave, they grab and eat the candy. Now, what do you expect? They're babies. They don't understand. They just see candy, right? And so, knowing this, the parents knew what was going to happen. The parents set them up to fail this particular test. But these babies, just like If and Divine says, are going to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, metaphorically put in the context of the candy on the table. So when you have children, they haven't been socialized yet to really understand what it means not to do something, and I can't have. It's right there in front of me. What do you mean I can't have it? They don't comprehend. They haven't been socialized to know what right from wrong is and what's bad and good. And so when you think about the Adam and Eve story, it is essentially just like this little test that these two parents, put on their children. And so this is it. When I first saw it, the first thing that came to my mind was Adam and Eve. And so it makes you wonder, at least of the God of the Bible, like, how intelligent can it be to not understand that when you created something with no knowledge of life, and then given instructions, that it would not fully understand exactly what you mean, and then at the same time you have to question the morality of that being, because once um once you have done something like this, you set them up to fail. You didn't give them intelligence in the first place to be able to discern anything. The question then becomes, why would you punish them after you set them up to fail? And then all of man after that, to the point where they are born into quote unquote sin. This is the ultimate question here. So if they are born, and we know that they had no knowledge, because when they ate of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, they knew that they were naked. Now the question is, was being naked good or bad? But regardless if you consider it good or bad, the question is, they didn't even know that they weren't covered in anything. So just eating of the tree of knowledge of good and evil informed them of something very basic, that they did not even have clothes, that they were running around with just their skin around nature. So if you didn't even know that you didn't have covering on, by what logic would you expect them to be able to discern, right from wrong, and what it fully means to disobey a quote unquote commandment? Like, these are the kinds of things we have to scrutinize. Now I see someone's this is the door of L states, we have no idea how much time passed in eternity. Um well, we it would be irrelevant, because as I stated in the beginning, if in order to know what is right or wrong, these are social constructs. They don't live in a society. There's no what's the language? Where are they getting the language in terms of the nuances, in terms of what is right or wrong? And why is it right or wrong? And what are the consequences? They have no idea. There's nothing that that states otherwise. He says we don't. We do know because they didn't even know that they were naked. So if enough time passed in eternity that they didn't even know that they were naked, then we know that they didn't know basic things of life. And so God created them to be cattle. Let me see. Ali Garrett says, sorry, the perfectly created humans, Adam and Eve, were expected to obey God, but they were unaware of many things. That is why the devil, controlling a snake, tricked them into disobeying God. How was it a trick? How would they know what a trick was? How would they know, um, how to resist? So God creates them and then doesn't provide them with the intellectual tools to resist a talking snake. This is what I'm saying. No matter how you look at it, Adam and Eve were set up for failure. So even the other animals are equipped with some kind of defense. So human beings have no natural defenses against nature. So he created the lions, the tigers, the elks, the leopards, birds. All of them have some level of defense against their enemies. And so deception and trickery is an enemy of Adam and Eve. And God gives them no intellectual tools, because this is something that you can't fight physically. So they can't grow horns out of their head or get longer teeth in order to defend themselves against irrationality. Let me see who else said something. Negus says Yahweh is a sadistic SOB. Indeed. He says Firelight and Tis, I don't think it was that they didn't know. I think it was mainly that they didn't judge or criticize it because they didn't have a ordered reasoning on why it should be looked down. So it would still be in the same category because you would have to know. See, what people don't really understand is that knowledge is gained, again, one, through experience, and two, in opposition to something that is false. Like you would have to have the dichotomy of what is true and what is not true in order for you to know something. So, for example, if I'm in Houston, Texas, and just picture a map of the United States of America, and I want to go in the direction of Atlanta, Georgia. I know that if I walk in, a northerly direction going towards Detroit in Canada, then I'm going in the wrong direction. If I started walking, I know that experience will tell me at some point that I'm not getting closer to my destination. And I'm gonna have to retrace my steps and go in a different direction. That's what experience does. So now if I, take that right on I-10 and then I can make it to Atlanta, Georgia, what I'm saying, from there. I now know that if I'm in Houston, I go this way as opposed to that way, because if I go that way, I will not reach my destination, which is this way. That's how knowledge works. It has to be in opposition to something. So that way I know. That's why it's important in science for experimentation, and why the scientific method requires you to do several tests to confirm or to with an attempt to falsify a hypothesis. And so we know that this is true over here, or more than likely true, because we've done all these experiments over here, which says that these are not true given the research question. And so it would be no different there. They have no experience. It's just them two. So what people fail to realize is the importance of community and society in your development. Let me see. uh, Venice Blue Dev says no right or wrong with lions. Exactly. You don't know if those things were learned or not. You're hypothesizing. Well, we know they weren't. They didn't learn anything. They had no knowledge. The Bible makes that clear. They had no knowledge of anything. They didn't know anything. They were intended to be deaf, dumb, and blind. And I could do a whole lesson on the serpent and how he represents knowledge, just off of the linguistics of the Hebrew language. Let me see. Exactly. It says Door of El believes the story. Let me see. It says Adam and Eve are Geb and Newt. We are talking about here. One could argue that, but that's a different conversation. Let me see. It's like betraying a baby. Is it really possible? No, because they knew no different anyway. The only culprit was God, sort of like a weird bully. Exactly. And we know that the God of the Bible was just bullying all throughout the text. He says, you are exhibiting the same points you say are lacking in scripture. If you say so. Let me see. He says, I agree. It is the knowledge, but it says where they got that knowledge from, eating the fruit. They didn't have it before that. Exactly. They have no knowledge. That's my point. They had no way of discerning information to know what was good or bad. If you don't know what was good, how would I know that following God's commandment was good? How would I know that breaking God's commandment was bad? If I didn't have the knowledge of good and evil, of what is right and wrong, there's no way I would have known that in the first place. So they were set up to fail. This is God's way of introducing something into reality in terms of evil, and then trying to put the blame on the human beings. Let me see. Besides, it literally says they were aware of their nakedness, implying they were not aware before. Exactly. Let me see. Gaining the knowledge is seemingly why they gained a bad taste for their own bodies and decided to cover it up. Let me see. If you are endowed with a library, you have access. That does not mean you use that knowledge gained after conversation with the deity and eating. You ain't making any type of sense whatsoever. Let me see. Yes, the sash, the wise serpent. And the serpent represents perception, symbolically paying precise attention to surroundings, at least in analytical psychology it is. All right. So it's not true. If you read the scriptures, she ate and gained knowledge from other trees. Oh, Lord. That tree only gave of good and evil. To have knowledge of good and evil is knowledge itself. It's like Adam and Eve were walking, talking individuals with sort of a vegetative state of mind, like no thought, but speaking, making sense. Exactly. And that's what our good brother or sister, Door of El, just is not grasping, you know. And this is part of the reasons why a lot of us are having problems with math and science in general. Don't understand what constitutes knowledge and how do you get there. Let me see. It was a setup, just like he and the devil made a bet on how to trill, or I guess kill, or how trill was Job. Yep. Exactly. They're in cahoots. Now, in some esoteric circles, they will argue that God and the devil are the same being. I won't make that argument today, but it wouldn't be surprising. Let me see. He says, sorry, I'm saying, when you have a problem with other people's beliefs, are you judging other people's you don't know? No, I don't judge them entirely. I judge their arguments, and I'm intelligent enough to be able to discuss people's arguments and the logic of it without making personal value judgments on the people themselves. And so, for example, Door of El, I was a Hebrew Israelite at once, and so there was a time in my life where I did not value critical thinking, research, sound judgment, and the like. It was all belief and based upon what was taught to me and what sounded good. And so I cannot in good judgment, just because someone still believes in those mythologies and doctrines, you know judge them harshly. I don't know the circumstances of their life which have allowed for them to come to that point. And who knows, they may grow up out of it at some point, but at this point, this is the level of knowledge in which they're at, and so we have to respect it. And so I'm not a Christian, I'm not a Hebrew Israelite, I'm not a Muslim. My job is not to proselytize anything. All I do is plant seeds. When the environment and the time and the maturity is there, they can go back to conversations like this, and it will challenge them. And if they are of the kind of mind to be open and grow, they will grow within themselves, and they will understand the the nature of those lessons and things of that nature. But I'm not trying to convert them into anything. I did not offer an alternative in this conversation, for the Bible in this sense. It's just we're having a conversation on the fact that we know that the Bible is a man-made um, doctrine, and that some human beings created it for some kind of political agenda, and they weren't the brightest of individuals. And we can go throughout the whole text and show this level of thinking. Like whoever wrote Genesis didn't think about the fact that when you're in outer space, there is no such thing as days. So when God created, the heavens and the earth in 6 days, and then he rested. And I know the Hebrew Israelite, go to in terms of, a day to the Lord is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is like a day. The whatever that scripture is. That's not what we're talking about here. You can tell that it is somebody on earth who conceptualized this particular concept. What is a day? It makes no sense for some being that does not live on earth and just exists and hovers over it, because a day is the rotation of the earth in 24 and a fourth hour, and we're calculating the presence of the from when the sun rises and sets, et cetera, et cetera. These are all concepts that only make sense on earth. If they were on another planet, what is a day? And then when you're in outer space, where there's no rotation of the space, what is the central axis from which you're determining what a day is? Like, these concepts are only human things. The fact that there are no female angels. Let me see. Those people aren't there. Those people aren't their arguments. Those people just don't know that some people go to work and think they are khakis in the same sense. Some people think that they are their religion, They can't talk about their religion without getting offended or mad. Indeed. Because, yeah, people self identify. Says God, devil equals deity suffering from schizophrenia. How can you be different from your creation? God made the devil, which means that the devil's likeness exists in God completely. Yeah. Because you got to even think about it like this: why even have evil? If God is the creator of all things, he had to conceptualize of evil. And then he had to, put it into existence somehow. Right. And so it's interesting that all through the Bible, the central cause of all the ruckus on earth is allegedly uh Satan, but he never gets rid of the devil. But when the human being acts a fool, they're immediately punished. It's like, no, you get rid of the source. But that's another conversation for another day. He says maybe God was just testing out how his latest creation would respond to his command. God is a scientist. Well, God wouldn't be a very good scientist. And this is the reason why I say this. The text itself says that God is omnipresent, omnipotent, and omniscient, meaning all knowing. There, when you, because I remember I presented this argument in New York for it was one of those Sodnetter debates we were having, and against the Hebrew Israelites. And this was having to deal with intelligent design. And so people like to put out intelligent design. I'm like, God of the Bible, that is not intelligent. It's impossible for him to be intelligent. Why? Because intelligence requires for you not to know something. Intelligence has to deal with one's ability to solve a problem in the absence of the ready-made solution for that problem. This is how you determine intelligence. When you see a problem, your ability to discern, to adapt and understand what is going on, and to dream up a positive solution for the problem. Well, that becomes a problem when you define God as omniscient, all-knowing. That means there's nothing that he does not know about, which means that he can't learn. So, in order to be intelligent requires you to have the ability to learn something new. If you are God and omniscient, it's impossible for you to learn anything new. Therefore, God, by definition, is not intelligent and therefore could not be the intelligent designer which created the universe according to those intelligent designer arguers. And so it shows you, like, even the whole concept of intelligent design is a human construct, and you will only know its limitations by being a human being. It would not be a concept that God came up with. And so let me see what else y'all say. Unfortunately, not all of us know that apparently. And they counting dog years. You don't have to offer a choice of options. You have done that by stating your opposition because you teach African spirituality. I teach Africana history. I'll leave that up to priest and priestess on the continent to teach African spirituality to people. I give references for folks. I don't proselytize and try to put and teach these things. If I'm teaching, in terms of anything that I personally have come across in my initiations and things, those are private for certain individuals. Everyone else gets Africana studies lessons. Let me see. God is supposed to be all knowing. He wouldn't need to test for something. Exactly. That's the point. God would be a terrible scientist. If God is a scientist, that means he doesn't know something, because science is a method of discovery. If he's omniscient, you can't discover something. Like it's a very simple thing to understand. What if they were referring to God being on a planet that takes 1,000 years to revolve around its sun? Then that would put God in a location, and then we have to understand that when they say God is um omnipresent, that means that there's no place in existence where God is not, which means that God could not be on a planet as an entity being and everything not be God itself. And so you have a contradiction in logic here. Let me see. I prefer the Heliopolis story. Okay, my sense. It's one thing to analyze where you are versus establishing those things that are being analyzed. If you created it, it is you exemplified through your creations. Indeed. It says up the video. And speaking of up in the video, of course, you know, I like to play my little ad, and here we go. Like, that is right. Hit the like button. If you are new to the channel, consider seriously subscribing to the channel so that we can continue to have these types of conversations and, you know, shake up the internet a little bit. And so let me go here. Thank you, Sister Tamika, for the reminder. He says you should have this discussion with Professor Riza Aslan. Are you saying Riza Islam? Um, or I guess Professor Reza Aslan. I may not, maybe a different person. He could answer your questions. I doubt it, but you know, I'm always open to discussion. Let me see. Is it possible that our experiencing of the senses and emotions are expressions of knowledge? Well, those are tools to know. But even that, our senses are very, very limited, and they do not allow for us to fully understand reality, which is why we must create instruments that are not quite easily fooled by reality as our human senses. Um, he said he threw away his control group. Exactly. He says Yadas because they're, I don't know, they look like spam in the chat. When I grow up, I want to be like, I doubt it. It says, I wish you did teach more on spirituality. I was glad to learn more about that aspect of you, though I still know minimum. Indeed. Maybe one day. Maybe one day. It was the first time God was making man. He had no prior experience in making man before. It wouldn't matter, you know. Again, if one would have to then make the argument like the Nation of Islam does regarding God. And so, you know, for them, Allah was a man, but I'm not sure if in their doctrine they argue that he, you know, while he had a vast array of knowledge and information, if that was in fact limited ultimately. And so somebody from the nation would have to be able to explain that you know, to you. But yeah, you know, it again, so it's like when in order to explain, you know, the Bible in terms of all the failures of God, uh, you know, it is you would have to strip away all of the titles of God, including omnipotent, omnipresent, and omniscient. Any failure requires, you know, you to strip those characteristics, those properties, you know, of God, of the Bible. And that's something that a lot of people are not willing to depart from. Let me see. I guess God doesn't watch the Discovery Channel. Yours truly said, great discussion. Thank you. But he is still supposed to be all knowing. Indeed. Let me see. I'm sorry. The Abrahamic religions are also part of Africa and have been before European colonization and slavery. That just depends on where you draw the borders of Africa. And so that, is up for debate. But what isn't up for debate are the modern borders. And so those religions emerge out of the wandering desert cultures of Arabs and Hebrews. And while, you can say that they have some quote unquote African elements, that would in a sense be cheating, because that is just more so a result of all human beings come out of Africa. And so they're going to retain certain uh, cultural things as a result of the evolution of human beings in general. So, but in terms of what is the dominant way to view reality and God on the continent of Africa, and then what you find in the Middle East, um, it is not the same. And we got to remember that the Hebrews and Arabs are not quote unquote black people, not in the sense in which we do today. And we know this because we have pictures of them from back in the day. And so maybe I'll share my screen. I'll see if I can find one of those conversations from the back, and I'll show you, exactly what I mean and why you cannot default to that argument. Because there's a lot of folks, including Sheikh Anta Diop, the late Renoko Rashidi also as well. I know Dr. Wesley Muhammad, tries to make that argument that Arabia is Africa in the language of Dr. Muhammad, that is quote unquote Africa's northeast extension. And so he says stuff like Afrabia, he labels it Afrabia. And that is, that's problematic for a, let me see if this is it. Yeah, I apologize for now. So again, so let's do this. So bong, I'm going to share my screen. Let me remove this video first and share my screen. So bong, and let's go here. Let's hide this. And so I'm going to slideshow from current slide. So this is a map from an article, written by or co-written by Andrew Kitchen, Dr. Christopher Ehret, Shafera Asafa, Connie J. Mulligan, called Bayesian Phylogenetic Analysis of Semitic Languages Identifies an Early Bronze Age Origin of Semitic in the Near East. And so, what they're arguing here is something that, they're finally coming to the realization that, Dr. Theophilo Benga made the argument before, since the 70s, that the Semitic languages were not born in Africa proper, and that they were born in the Levant, and from the Levant they spread downward, going into Ethiopia, Eritrea, Yemen, etc. But they originate here in the Levant. And so again, this is from a genetic article, but I'm just showing the map here. So when we say Africa, of course, we're cutting it off right here by the Suez, by the peninsula here, by the Sinai Peninsula and the Suez Canal, and all of this over here. So this is Africa. And so over here is just Asia. This is just Southwest Asia. And Europe is just Northwest Asia. And then this is the rest of Asia, here, right? So let me just skip down. So the Egyptians, called the Asiatics by a number of names. One of the main names was, we say, uh, you know, Amu, but I'm pretty sure that the pronunciation was a lot different back in the day. And so this is one of the words for Asiatic, a nomad from the desert of the Eastern Desert, a shepherd, nomad, herdsman, farmer, the falahin, shepherds, etc., etc. is also a word for animal or beast or cattle, and the cattle of Egypt. And this is important to note because the reason why these people were named that is because cattle and beasts do not settle down anywhere. They just roam. And so what they're describing, they're using what we call in linguistics a euphemism. They're using a word that means an animal or beast to describe the lifestyle, the nomadic and shepherd lifestyle of the quote unquote people from Asia, right? And so we know in Genesis 46 and 34b that all shepherds are an abomination to the Egyptians. And they have their problems with these people because of their lifestyle and the values that emerge in such a lifestyle. So for example, in the instructions of Mary Kare, and this is from the first intermediate period, the 10th Egyptian dynasty, and they describe these Asiatics. These are ultimately the people who will become your Hebrews, your Syrians, your Arabs, etc., etc. It says, "Lo, the miserable Asiatic or Amu. He is wretched. He's in poverty. He's suffering because of the place he is in, because they live in the desert, short of water, bare of wood. Its paths are many and painful because of mountains. He does not dwell in one place." And so that's important. And they're just hopping from place to place. Food propels his legs. That means they're always on the hunt for food. He fights since the time of Horus. Horus is a mythological uh, entity. And so, but the idea here is that since the beginning of time, these people have been at war. They're always warring with people, not conquering anything nor being conquered, because they are small bands of nomadic, pastoralists. And so if you understand like the Taliban, the situation with the Taliban and ISIS and all of those individuals, they're continuing a legacy in history that was at least recorded since the time of the pharaohs. And he says, like a thief who darts about a group, that's because they're always fighting, they're always at war, they're always stealing, they're always looking for food. And so there's a certain value set that comes about these people. And so the ancient Egyptians have been having problems with them because of their constant invasions trying to rob Egyptians of food and the like. And so they depicted these folks. So, in the Hebrews are not some isolated incident, like everybody around them was not black, but they were, as some Hebrew Israelites like to say. And this is the depiction. So this is a modern um picture of, like an Arab or a Falahin in this area. And so you see this wall depiction here this is a fragment of an Asiatic or Amu captive from the Ramesside period. You see the commonalities in terms of hairstyle, in terms of skin tone, in terms of facial features and the like, but it gets better. So we continue here. This block relief depicting a battle, possibly the reign of Amenhotep II from the 18th dynasty. And so more Asiatics. So these look like all the folks who own at the gas station, who own the gas stations, who be in the park in London, arguing with folks about Islam. They look exactly the same. And so this is, Hebrew Israelites don't like these discussions. They can't have these discussions when we start talking archaeology and depictions, because this is before all of that, before a lot of what was going on in the Middle East, before you could start arguing that the quote unquote Hebrews left and they stole your identity, etc. So here's a Nubian and an Asiatic prisoner, fettered at the elbows, painted soles of 2 sandals in the New Kingdom. So this is on the soles of the sandals. So you see the depiction of these folks. These are all the people in Israel, Syria, and Arabia. They look like this. And so, here's that famous, wall painting of the so-called, they like to claim that they're Israelites, but these are Syrian women and Amorite women from the 12th dynasty. And you can see all these folks. And what I have circled here, you have to actually see, if you can't really on the screen, the so-called fringes that the Hebrew Israelites, have to wear. They're the ones wearing the fringes. This is what these folks look like. These aren't black people. And so here we go. Here it says, Yahweh spake unto Moses, saying, speak unto the children of Israel and bid them that they make them fringes in the borders of their garments throughout their generations. And this is Numbers 15, 37, and 40. These are Amorites, Syrians. And so when we deal in real life and understand population dynamics and how the shared features exist as a kind of fluid gradient across a wide geographical space, you understand that the reason why all these folks look alike is because they evolved to look alike in this area, just like this. So those people, those Arabs and Jews and Syrians and stuff who are there now, and how they look, they've been looking like this, and we've recorded how they looked. So here's more depictions of an Asiatic on the right hand side, those long beards, the hair, all that. So here's another one. Look straight out of the ISIS detail. Here's some more. Here's a Syrian right here. Here's a so-called Haparu or Shashu. These are not black African people, and the biblical tradition does not arise out of these black African people. And so, who is this? A dreamer of Alalach, king of the Habaru. Photo of a statue of Idrima of Allah or Alalach in the British Museum. This ain't African, folks. Where are they getting this stuff from? Here's a Haparu head dated between 1800 BC and 1100 BC. As compared to the Egyptians. You see the drastic difference? And so they don't want to have those discussions. And let me stop sharing there. And so hopefully that makes sense. And so let me see what y'all talking about here. He says, the earliest Arab civilizations are African, and so are the ancient Israelites. Is proven by Professor Ranoka Rashidi. No, it wasn't proven by Professor Ranoka Rashidi. This is, I'm gonna go with the archaeology. The Egyptians knew the people around them, and when they drew them exactly how they look today, and they had no political bias than anyone. He says the Egyptians had more cattle than anyone. Not necessarily. They only had cattle in the Delta area. That was the only place that could sustain it. As a matter of fact, the Delta was a highway in which a lot of nomadic groups passed. Let me see. That's the movie Dr. John Henry Clark and Blade did. Deep. And Blade did a movie. Why would Egyptians have those views of shepherds but depict their pharaohs as shepherds with a crook? That's a good question. And they had a lot of cattle uh symbolism, but symbolism that was settled. So I guess the ultimate issue is that they saw themselves as urbanized and settled, and that it was a greater lot than what you would have if you were nomadic. So it wasn't that, when you actually understand the at least the point that the ancient Egyptians were making, it's not that just because they were shepherds, is as I stated before and why I cited um, that text from Mary Carre, is that there's a value system and a lifestyle that comes with being strictly a nomadic pastoralist. Matter of fact, if you read a book called uh, ah, and now I gotta go and oops, I have to go and find this book. It's the Southern. So this is why I don't like not having my books with me, and why I can't wait to get back to Philly. Um, it's the Southern. It's the ah. It's the because it's a culture of honor. That's the name of the book. Look up a text called Culture of Honor, and it's going to deal with the South of the United States. And this is just one of many texts that discusses the culture of honor that emerges out of nomadic pastoralist lifestyles, and how most of your robberies and slaveries and things of that nature come out of groups who emerge from this particular lifestyle. So whether you're talking about the Fulani of 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 West Africa, whether you're talking about the Collagen, the Maasai, whether you're talking about the Far, the Roro, whether you're talking about the Hebrews, whether you're talking about the Arabs, whether you're talking about the Syrians, whether you're talking about the Indo-Europeans, whether you're talking about Genghis Khan and the Mongoloids, all of them have in common that that their culture emerged and developed from nomadic pastoralism, and they all have created what they call this culture of honor. And so if you can find that book on Amazon, it's a real thin book. I encourage you to get it. It'll give you a basis from then to continue your studies. So I am currently in research and writing a book called Religious Proselytization. Yeah, yeah. Yes, religious proselytization as a violation of the African principle of simultaneous validity. That's actually the subtitle, and it deals with that. So I'm gonna be dealing with that culture of honor, the values and things across the globe. So this isn't a quote unquote black thing or a Asian thing or European thing. Is that cultures that emerge with the nomadic pastoralism, they all have these kidnapping, killing, um, rob, you know, just cultures. So when you understand that, you can understand Europe, mainly in terms of Greece, in terms of Rome, in terms of Germans, in terms of the Scot Irish, in terms of the British. You can understand all of the issues dealing with the southern states and slavery. You can understand the the Boko Haram in northern Nigeria and the Fulani raids, and most of the West African kingdoms. What a lot of folks don't want to tell you is that a lot of those West African kingdoms that everybody likes to praise are Muslim kingdoms, and they were created by nomadic pastoral Fulani who was going around raiding and creating slaves. They're the ones who set the precedents for all the slave trading going on in West Africa. And so this is a very deep topic, and you're going to have to get out of the religious and put your anthropologists and sociologist hats on to really kind of understand these things. And so the Egyptians understood this to some degree, and they understood why. Like there's the line in there, and it says that hunger, propels their legs. They're always, searching for food, searching for resources, because they live and exist in marginalized areas, whether it's sand deserts or whether it's ice deserts. It's the lack of abundance in the environment that changes or influences the mentality and the behavior of these particular social groups that emerge in those living environments. So that's a good study, and a good series could be done on that. He says Speaker's Corner's Dawa team just took an L. Yeah, well, I don't know who Dawa's team is, but I know, like, when I think there's a few, Arabs who I've seen, on the Speaker's Corner in London, who look just like those depictions in the in the ancient Egyptian reliefs. He says, I love blocking these people saying goofies. He says, y'all back and forth, I see. He says, look like Tazariak. It's got to be Sean. Let me see. Yeah, back and forth. Let's see. Let's see. They have a conversation about something. I started in the conversation because no plan was made on that. Oh, y'all still on the Big Bang. You see, that was simple conversations just being drawn out 12 more hours. Y'all must be talking about a pseudo killer show. He says, he was spot on. Yeah, nope. Yeah, he says Wesley Snipes. I couldn't think of his name. Yeah, he said Blade. Yeah. You're talking about a Long and Mighty Walk, produced by Wesley Snipes on Dr. John Henry Clark. See that hairstyle, the brother is so lit. He said to keep it 100. When we say black, we have to be more specific on what we're talking about. Let me see. And she don't read Africa Present, Early Asia, or any Professor Runoko Shidi's books. I've read all the stuff, and a lot of stuff is not compelling. You can have an African presence there and they not be Arabs. Again, Arab is really the matter of fact, the word Arab is just the syllabic inverse of the word Hebrew and Haparu. They're all the same. It just really describes a people who are nomadic and pastoralists. It's not a race, but when we talk about Arabs in the modern time in an academic sense, you're talking about a language group. And when we're talking about Semites, the Semites do not originate in Africa. They originate in the Levant, and they spread out from there. Let me see. He says, Dasharam, sorry, just showed you what they look like. Rashidi was wrong. Update your info and stop being a hero worshiper. See, because they're not going to get past the ancient Egyptians with the old depictions. The ancient Egyptians were describing what they saw, and there was not none of this modern day racism to cloud their judgment. Let me see. I'm sorry. Make sure you get the link from Wu and go beat up Unc over there. I have no idea what they are talking about right now, but he claims we have 2 moons. I'm not going to waste my time debating with Brother Unc. I've learned over the years that when I disagree with somebody, I make one presentation, and then I just leave it up for the people to decide. If you don't get it, my aim is not to convince you. I'm not going to argue with anyone who has comprehension issues on the subject. then I look like a fool wasting my time, because I got books to write, I got a trip to prepare for. I just ain't got time to spend 12 hours on a show arguing about the Big Bang in Africa. He needs moons to get ready and see me and train and stay ready. Exactly. He couldn't get past our first argument. So he says, you previously quoted Aaron on how the early Semites, Hebrews, and Arabs were black. Not agree anymore. He never made a statement that they were black. The quote that I quote from Eric is that he says that this was an old interview of Eric. So we got to keep the chronology in order. This is an old interview of Eric, who said that the Semites were a bunch of Africans who met some people who were already in Arabia. That's what he said. So some years later, after doing some more serious analysis, he came to the conclusion that the Semitic languages, him in a group, so it's Christopher Arendt and these other scholars who compiled this journal article and came to the conclusion, just like Theophilo Binga did, that the Semitic languages originate in the Levant. And so the reason why I cite Christopher Arendt in the earlier statement is to demonstrate at least a point of agreement with the modern scholarship coming from persons like myself and Jean-Claude Mboli, which argues that the Semitic languages are an amalgam of whatever the original languages are from those people who have, been there since 30,000 BCE, and this new wave of Africans who came among them and lived among them and interacted, and over a course of time a convergence happened and Proto-Semitic is born. So I'm trying to show the logic of the argument, and showing how, when the likes of Christopher Arendt and others are forced to deal with the evidence on the ground, that they have to change their position in regards to this issue here. And so that's what we were, what I quoted and why I quoted. Let me see. Would love to hear you speak more on the West African slave trade and how it was us who set up the system that the Europeans came in and exploited. I'll leave that up to people like with the Mosi Warrior clan if they choose to. While I can speak on it, one thing I can say is that it was not the same, because there's only two nations that I know of, actually three. I take that back. Three nations that I know of where they had a slave economy, and they came late into the game already once slavery as a system was established. And that is the Ashanti Kingdom, that is the Benin Kingdom, and that is the Congo Kingdom. Those three are the only ones that, and more so the first two than the latter, are the only kingdoms where their society was built off of a slave economy. Everyone else is just victims of the slave trade and wars that were happening as a result of, Fulani, those nomadic pastoralist invasions and things. And so, I've already I may do a new lecture series. But it's based off of an old one. So I don't know if I have it on. I know I used to do it personally in person, like in cities, but there's a lecture I do called The Fall of Egypt as the Catalyst for the Transatlantic Slave Trade. And in that, I kind of discuss all of that. And so I have to bring in the cultures of honor and explain what that is, to get a sense of the psychological development and the history of these people and how they destabilized West Africa, and with the help of the Arabs, and then of course the Europeans coming later, and getting involved in expanding on the slave trade, as a result of the weapons that they were able to develop because of their own internal wars that they've been having with each other for 6,000 years straight. So it's a whole thing, and requires a good a good lesson. So I may do that in the future once I have some time. Maybe I'll start this summer on that, God willing. Let me see. Arab set up the miles. More information. Check out the Mostly Word Clan YouTube. It sounds appreciated. I was just saying, I didn't already knew, because that's what I laid that up to them. I'm gonna stay in my lane for a minute, and then conquer the world on the Archaeology front. Anyway, it says Maasai are African though. Africans were the first nomads, of course. If Africans were not the first nomads, we wouldn't have been able to populate the rest of the earth. No one's saying that being nomads is the issue. Is specifically nomadic pastoralist. Nomadic pastoralist. Pastoralism has not always been with us. And so that's a relatively new phenomenon in, evolutionarily speaking. And so that's the nature of the conversation there. Let's see. He says, I feel like I missed something regarding Darwin. I'll rewind later. Indeed. See. And Asiatics is nomads. They were Africans as nomads. Again, that's not the point. We can't be saying nomads were Asiatic. No one did. I'm sorry. The earliest Arabs, like the Sabaeans and other earliest Yemenites, are African. They were not Arabs, and I gotta tell folks this. You had, Ethiopian groups and Nilotic groups who used to go back and forth into Arabia. They were not Arabs, and so people like to think of and just attach, because some Africans was going back and forth into Arabia, that they were Arabs. It's like, no, that's modern religious thinking, trying to attach themselves in Arabic language and culture. Semites don't originate in Arabia. They originate in the Levant, and they spread downward, and they met other folks in those areas. But then again, you also have to understand that there's groups there who have been there since the out of Africa, because the out of Africa had two routes: out of Egypt with the Nile River, and then through Ethiopia into Yemen. And it's from there, following the coast and things, that human populations, began to spread around the earth. He said, can you recommend books on the topic? And I don't know if you said it below. I'm kind of still up a little bit. So Miles Dyson, if you can be clear, a little bit more specific on the subject matter on the books that you want me to recommend, and then I can go from there. He said Arabia, Arabic, and Hebrew. Let's see. And so did the Fulani align with the Arabs to wreak havoc in West Africa that caused the West African slave trade? It's not that they, in some instances they did, in some instances no. It's just that's who they are. So it looks like this is definitely going to have to be a series of conversations that we have, because a lot of people don't seem to understand the nature of pastoralist societies. And so let me see if I can just give you kind of a taste of what I mean. So while I'm looking for this information, y'all check out this commercial, and we'll go from there. Let me go into videos. Boom. And where am I going? Video projects. I should just have this stuff ready, but I'm slow on these days. What am I looking for? Oh, and then boom, and then boom.
You see, a lot of things that's on my mind, and I would like to let them out. Look, I see reality breaking down all my fantasies. It would be nice if I at least had one fantasy. That neutrality about to take a terabyte from the American apple pie, better get a slice. It's kinda scary the way that this life is moving on. Marvin's doing backflips inside his grave, what's going on? We have head-on collisions, not seeing another's vision. Maybe that's the reason why some colors fit the description. A lot of relationships need life rafts, sinking ships. I guess you just can't have only one like potato chips. I would love for you to listen with an open heart, but would you really even hear me if it's torn apart? I don't do the things that I used to. I'll be fine even if I lose you, okay? Yeah. Okay.
Peace and blessings, family. My name is Asarimhotep, and I am with the Martin Delaney Center for Egyptology, as well as the popular YouTube channel Mbongi. I am an Africologist and computer scientist out of Houston, Texas, and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And I have spent the last 20 years researching the connections between ancient Kemet, that is modern Egypt, and modern Bantu-speaking cultures of Central and Southern Africa. Throughout this 20-year journey, I've examined all the relevant literature in numerous languages, collected paleontological as well as archaeological data from across millennia. I have presented hypotheses and abandoned hypotheses, come to conclusions and abandoned conclusions, reviewed arguments for and against known hypotheses, and analyzed frameworks that sought to define and characterize the vast array of African experiences. After over 20 years of asking critical questions of history, of philosophy, religion, and culture, I have finally gotten to the point where I have complete and total faith in the results of our research. I say our research because I am one of among a number of scholars who have either laid the foundations in classical Africology or are continuing to expand and develop more robust research on this connection between ancient Egyptian and Bantu civilizations. After spending so much time behind the computer and in the libraries and in the museums for over 20 years, I believe it is time to go out and to touch the living artifacts and engage with the people involved in the research whose stories we have been telling all this time, which brings us to why we are here today. Although I have written and will continue to write about the results of my research, my goal now is to summarize this data and present it in documentary film form. I have decided to put some of that computer science as well as new media experience together to creatively tell this important aspect of African history that many may not be aware of. The title of the film is China Into, Ancient Kemet and the Into Universe, and we are currently raising funds for the first phase of our journey. In February of 2022, I will be joining the crew of the award-winning documentary film Happy, The Role of Economics on the Development of Civilization, for a very important Returning to the Source tour and conference in Egypt, which we know is in Northeast Africa. And while I am there, I will be shooting parts of our film China Into and gathering footage for a proof of concept trailer, which will be used for greater fundraising efforts in the near future. And this is where you come in. I am currently trying to raise $5,000 to help with location expenses, equipment rentals, insurance, and the like, so that we can get some great shots for some primary as well as B-roll footage. When we return from Egypt, some of this footage will be combined with some preliminary interviews to compile a unique trailer to give the audience and potential investors a glimpse of the vision and potential of the film. Our ultimate goal is to travel to places like the Democratic Republic of Congo, Zimbabwe, Uganda, and South Africa for the first film. And did I forget to mention that we intend for this to be a series of documentary films? Therefore, subsequent films will require us to travel to places like Cameroon, Nigeria, Ghana, and Senegal, as well as Ethiopia, Kenya, and Somalia. We have big goals, and with your help, we can make this happen. And if you're interested in donating to this film project, please visit our website at www.chianaintofilm.com, where you can leave a donation. There are other ways you can donate as well, which includes joining our Patreon page, donating through CashApp, or donating live when we're doing a live show on YouTube. And the YouTube channel has over 6,000 subscribers, and Facebook has over 5,000 subscribers as well. And with a minimum donation of like $5 each, we can quickly reach our goal. You can spread the word of our efforts by sharing this video with friends and colleagues, as well as liking it. We appreciate your help, and all donors will be given credit on the website, as well as at the end of the film during the credits. We thank you from the bottom of our heart to those who have given generously already, and we look forward to bringing this important film to the public. Hotep. I do appreciate, let me put the mic down for a moment. So I found the slideshow that I was looking for, and I just want to say, again, that we are raising funds for the upcoming trip to Egypt to shoot some of the documentary film that you just witnessed there. And I want to thank each and every person who has donated thus far. And just to let you know, let me see. We'll do that. I'll share the screen. This is the website, ChianaIntoFilm.com. And so far, out of our 5,000 goal, we have reached $1,994. And actually, I think someone just sent in a $12 donation as well. So this is going to go up once I, approve the thing in the back end here. So, we are gaining and people are donating, and we do appreciate you greatly. So, when you make a donation here, it shows up, if you go through PayPal or if you go through the Cash App, then I add it on here so you can keep a tally of all the donations and where they came from or whatnot. So if you would like to see this project see the light of day, you can help in terms of phase one by giving a donation, on our website there. So thank each and every one of you who have given already. And I encourage everyone else to bless us, and believe me, you will not be disappointed at the end product. So let me see. So when I'm talking about the culture of honor stuff, right? So now I'm gonna have to reshare my screen. So hopefully y'all still rocking with me, and we kind of went in a different direction. But for those who were just joining or recently joined in the conversation, to get to the initial conversation is within the first hour, and so we will. So in the second hour, it was just kind of question and answer, and then it kind of shifted a little bit. So let me share my screen again, and let me make it full screen. And so boom, I'll just go from the beginning. So let me go back. Slideshow. Oh, there we go. So this comes, from a lecture I did in October of last year. The year before, called "Why I Can't Rock with the Bible," Part 1, Poor Models of Manhood. And some of this was taken from the earlier conversation that I mentioned before. And so, so I had to start off the conversation when describing the Hebrews and the Arabs to understand what the culture of honor is, right? And so this is from a text called Culture of Honor and Violence Against the Self by Lindsay L. Osterman and Ryan P. Brown, from 2011. And it says, according to Nisbet, and we'll see Nisbet in a little bit, and Cohen, 1996, cultures of honor place a unique emphasis on upholding and defending the reputation and person of oneself and one's family. In particular, it is of the utmost importance for men in cultures of honor to maintain reputations for being competent providers and strong protectors. Perhaps because of this emphasis on strong reputations, men in honor cultures perceive interpersonal threats more readily than do men in other cultures. Furthermore, they are obliged to respond to such threats vigorously, even violently, which can be both dangerous and difficult. Therefore, it can and often does involve physical retaliation. Proper retaliation appears to be the requisite for maintaining one's reputation as well as one's personal sense of masculinity. Citations. In other words, a man's sense that he is a real man, quote unquote, and also his reputation for being such depends on his ability to successfully defend himself, his name, and his family against any and every threat. And I should add perceived threat at least. And so, anybody who is dealt in the hood and especially in a jail context and been in jail, you see this firsthand. But this is the beginnings of it. There's other aspects of this. And so I'm gonna skip this one for now. Let me see. Culture of honor, violence, and homicide. And these are helping constituents to address local and wrong. We propose that culture that allow and encourage them to do so in response to this. Okay, so I'll read this. So this is just the abstract of a paper presented by Brown and Osterman that we were introduced to earlier. And they said in the abstract, culture promotes beliefs and values that help its constituents to address local and enduring problems. We propose that cultures that allow and encourage certain forms of violence do so in response to specific ecological problems, namely pervasive resource deprivation and unreliable law enforcement. So the ancient Egyptian citation from Mary Carrá, demonstrates this exact fact which they're talking about in this abstract. The convergence of these problems over long periods of time, that means resource deprivation and unreliable law enforcement, we argue, results in a social environment that requires vigilant and aggressive defense of reputation, person, and property as a means of deterrence. As an illustration of such a culture, we discuss the history of the Ulster Scots, or AKA the Scot Irish, who settled the southern and western United States in the 18th and 19th centuries, regions that are characterized even today as cultures of honor. We review empirical evidence regarding behavioral patterns in these honor states, with a focus on evidence indicating that residents of these states are not more violent in general, but tend to display behaviors related to the vigilant and aggressive defense of honor at both the individual and collective levels. When such social adaptations become entrenched in a culture's schemas, scripts, and identity dynamics, they can be transmitted from one generation to the next, long after the ecological circumstances that encourage them have dissipated. So this is the reason why, for example, when people leave Islam, or especially like when women want to leave marriages and stuff, like they're met with violence, because Arabic culture emerges out of this honor culture. out of these pastoralist and nomadic conditions in terms of existing in the desert lands that is resource deprived, and they don't have a state, so there's no central law enforcement. There's no equivalence to Ma'at in the governing principles like that. And we see this in, at least in this example, showing how the Scot-Irish folks existed in a similar type of condition. And I'm going to show you this on the African thing. And so this is the book From the Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. Matter of fact, this is the first book that I read that even introduced me to this concept. So this is what it states starting on page 166. Cultures of honor tend to take root in highlands in other marginally fertile areas, such as Sicily or the mountainous Basque regions of Spain. If you live on some rocky mountainside, the explanation goes, you can't farm. You probably raise goats or sheep, and the kind of culture that grows up around being a herdsman is very different from the culture that grows up around growing crops. The survival of a farmer depends on the cooperation of others in the community. That's why in ancient Egyptian society, you have concepts of like ma'at, which means open-hearted sharing in offerings and things, because it's a primarily an agriculturalist culture. But a herdsman is off by himself. Farmers also don't have to worry that their livelihood will be stolen in the night, because crops can't easily be stolen unless, of course, a thief wants to go to the trouble of harvesting an entire field on his own. But a herdsman does have to worry. He's under the constant threat of ruin through the loss of his animals. So he has to be aggressive. He has to make it clear through his words and deeds that he is not weak. He has to be willing to fight in response to even the slightest challenge to his reputation. And that's what a culture of honor means. It's a world where a man's reputation is at the center of his livelihood and self-worth. If you understand what I just read, you will be able to better understand the emergence of Islam. So outside of the myth that the Prophet Muhammad was visited by the angel Gabriel and was given some revelations to spread, the history of Muhammad has a totally different context. This individual, along with his marauders, were going around raiding caravans, because nomadic pastoralist people always are raiding. And the logic for a lot of defenders of Muhammad is that he was trying to get back some items that was allegedly stolen from him. And so, which doesn't make any sense, because this was years later, and of course they wouldn't have been the same items that was allegedly stolen from him or his people. They were already into raiding, because that's what nomads do. This is why the Egyptians have an abomination for the shepherds, those nomadic pastoralists, because they are constantly robbing, they are constantly stealing, they are constantly initiating violence everywhere they go. And we're going to see some more of this. He says the culture of honor hypothesis says that it matters where you're from, not just in terms of where you grew up or where your parents grew up, but in terms of where your great-grandparents and great-great-grandparents grew up, and even where your great-great-great-grandparents grew up. That is a strange and powerful fact. It's just the beginning, though, because upon closer examination, legacies turn out to be even stranger and more powerful than that. So when we're talking about this culture, it's not just simply like a 1 or 2 generational thing. This is a generation and generation. The culture itself must emerge and flourish under these particular conditions, and then spread, and be descended over time. And this is exactly what is going on. So when we study, for example, the nomadic hoarders from the steppes, that emerged in invaded West in terms of Europe is concerned. And so they established the Greek societies. So when you study, for example, the Spartans, and we've had conversations about the Spartans, these were some nomadic, raiding, bullying people. But that's because they emerged out of the steeps, out of the mountains, that was deprived of resources. All of Europe is deprived of resources. This is why the Europeans went around the world invading and taking over places, because Europe has ultimately no resources. And so they did what normal cultures that emerge from pastoralists do. They raid and invade. And this is not exclusive to Europeans and Arabs. And I'm going to show you this a little later. Cultural legacies are powerful forces. They have deep roots and long lives. They persist generation after generation, virtually intact, even as the economic and social and demographic conditions that spawned them have vanished. And they play such a role in directing attitudes and behavior that we cannot make sense of our world without them today. And so this is the book that I was talking about, Culture of Honor. So if you see this cover, this is the book that I was talking about, Culture of Honor, The Psychology of Violence in the South meaning the United States. So here's Richard E. Nisbet, who I talked about earlier, and Dov Cohen. And so it says, people who herd animals usually live in places such as mountains, semi-deserts, and steeps, where because of the ecology, crop farming is inadequate to provide basic food needs. They have little surplus and sometimes experience genuine want. Thus, they are often tempted to take the herds of other groups. As a consequence, theft and raiding are endemic to pastoral peoples. Or as one herdsman of the Middle East put it, raids are our agriculture. Thus, skill at warfare is valuable to a herdsman in a way that is not to a hunter-gatherer or a farmer. It is no accident that it is the herding peoples of Europe who have been reputed to be the best soldiers over the centuries, that to the Scots, as to the Swiss and Swedes and Albanians, Prussians, and other people of Europe's margins and infertile uplands, war has been something of a national industry. And so I'm going to skip this and I'm going to go down to this. And so here's a book, Race and Identity. And I'm going to end with this book, Race and Identity in the Nile Valley. And so it's edited by Carolyn Fleur-Lebon and Carissa Rhodes, right? So in this particular article, it states the four major so we're dealing with Africa here. So this has nothing to do with Arabs. It has nothing to do with Europeans. So you can't, blame them and say that they are the ones who introduced this culture. No, all nomadic pastoralist cultures have this same attitude and develop so independently because of the nature of the very existence of the mode of production in which they find themselves involved in, their subsistence strategy, right? So the four major pastoral groups in southern Sudan include the Dinka, the Nuer, the Atuat, and the Murle. According to their oral histories, since the 18th century, these groups have raided each other for cattle and women. Like most pastoral lineage societies around the world, raiding for animals and people is a time-honored activity. Almost all customarily rob and pillage their pastoral neighbors, for to continue long in a state of peace diminishes their wealth. Think about that. To live in an extended era of peace diminishes your wealth. So you have to start wars in order to remain wealthy in your society. This is exactly what happened in Benin, and why they were a primary source of slavery in Nigeria. that for another day. Thus, war and plunder became necessary. For example, the Dinka philosophy historically has been that many wives shall bring forth many daughters, who shall be married with great numbers of cattle. Thoy Dinka, Philip Thorne Morale states. So, Philip Thorne Morale is interviewing a Dinka by the name of Thoy Dinka, and he stated that there has been a lot of raiding for greed. It has always been important to show we are good warriors, and when you are strong, you go and rob the weak. It was the formula for those days, and everybody did it. If you defeated another clan, you took their cows and women. We took the women to become wives, while young girls could be married to other men and bring more cows. Small boys could raid for more cattle. Paul Lovejoy terms these pastoral practices as lineage slavery. He reasons that women and children abducted in raids are forcibly cut off from kin, and that the property element, the alien identity, the role of violence, and the productive and sexual exploitation of human beings is always present in pastoral raiding systems. I'm going to read that again. I'm going to do it slowly. He reasons that women and children abducted in raids are forcibly cut off from kin and the property element, the alien identity, the role of violence, and the productive and sexual exploitation of human beings is always present in pastoral raiding systems. This is not only correct in the case of the Dinka and the Nuer, however, for kin are not always cut off, and numbers have returned to their own families in later years, particularly when it became time to get married. The nature of pastoral raiding in these societies took a turn for the worse with the arrival of a new group of pastoralists to the north, talking about those Arabs. And so, um, let me see here. So this is I'll end with this one because this one speaks more to the Bible itself. So this is from the text Egypt, Canaan, and Israel in Ancient Times. And so by Donald B. Redford. He says, dominating the primitive concepts of the community of nascent Israel was the notion of a contract between Yahweh, the God of the group, and the human community. Therefore, Israel's sovereignty resided with Yahweh, not the community. The rules he laid down unitarily, in fact, the human party to the contract had no say in the matter, were draconian in the extreme, and the deity's will utterly barbaric. Alien groups whose actions or even presence were deemed in opposition to Israel, because remember, they're a culture of honor, and anything that seems to be opposite of them, they took them as enemies, are consigned to genocidal slaughter at the behest of Yahweh. And these are, the examples here. Even fraternization with foreigners brings a plague. Anyone who dissents Yahweh is burned up. And these are the sources here in the Bible. Anyone who complains, he strikes with a plague or sends poisonous snakes after them. Aberrant cultic practices, even though indulged in innocently, brings death. And so this is the text. And so I'll end there because then it gets into more of the reason for that particular conversation. And so this is why I say that you have to go deeper and have to do more serious studies on these concepts, because now you can understand the cultural dynamic that emerges in the psychology which births a Yahweh, because the concept of God is reflective of the people who imagined it. And so there's a reason why Yahweh is offended that if you look at other and want to do something that other people's, because Yahweh is the product of the culture of honor, Habaru, nomadic pastoralist. And it's the same thing with Allah of the Arabs. And so it's a lot deeper. It's a lot simpler to understand. But if you understand this, then you can understand why the Fulani do what they, because the Fulani is no different. The Dinka and the Nuer, the Collagen, the Maasai, these are all nomadic pastoralist groups who live on the margins of places that are resource deprived and have no, central society, because they don't settle down and become, urbanites, urbanist or whatnot. And so this is what emerges from those type of societies, and they create religions that reflect that culture of honor. So slavery is inevitable in those societies. This is why, for example, why in the Bible, when they allegedly got out of slavery in Egypt, the first thing that their God allegedly commands them to do is to go raid Canaan and to kill everybody and to rape and take the women and even all the cattle and things, to take over the land. So this is how we know that this is not something from a benevolent God. These were human beings that emerge out of a certain cultural context that gave birth to these stories to try to justify raiding, because that's what nomadic pastoralists do. They constantly raid, pillage, rape. They do the whole nine. And it doesn't matter if you are African. It doesn't matter if you are from the Middle East, if you are a Mongolian in Asia, if you are Russian, if you are English, Scott Irish, Roman, Italian. Everywhere these types of people and these cultures emerge, you're going to have a large scale violence because of these things. And so, so what the research that I'm doing in that text that I'm writing is to show you how culturally these people have evolved, and how the religions emerge from there, from the psychology and the experiences of those people. And this is how you get these different things in the Bible like this, because they weren't scientists. They weren't thinking on that level. So everything was to try to justify a particular political ideology. That's why the women have no value, because they're just a means, just like within amongst the Dinka there. The rating of women is to get them to get more cattle, because cattle is the currency amongst the nomadic pastoralists. So the more cattle you have, the more wealth or wealthy you are seen to have. So the more women that I can steal from other communities, the more I can get more cattle from them. Because anybody that wants, the women that I have, you have to give me, the new owner of the woman, this amount of cattle. He says, so Yahweh really Egyptian though? He's not. Trust me. He says, yep, they wilding out. He's like, women had it hard then. Exactly. Yep, the Tereg is the same way. See, this stuff gets deep. And thank you, Sister Archaeology mine, for the super chat here and the donation. Thank you very much. It's greatly appreciated. And he says that no water and bare wood, can't blame pastoralism. This is one of the reasons why you adopt pastoralism, so that you have a constant source of food and milk. This is why people started drinking milk, because of nomadic pastoralists. And so in areas in where water wasn't abundant, you drink the milk. People gotta understand anthropology. Adam and Eve in the Bible, Torah and the Quran story, not a real human history. They were around 5,000 BC, 7,000 years ago. Our Black ancient ancestors' real history were around more than 100,000 years ago. All of human history goes back 100,000. Let me see. He says that's Euro racist crap. Culture of honor is Fulani lifestyle. Exactly. And that's why the Fulani are, one of the number one source of issues in West Africa. Matter of fact, I'm gonna show you. Let me see. Hold on. Hold on. So I'm gonna share my screen again. And so I'm gonna go back to that first presentation I was doing. And so now I'm going to quote the sons of God, the sons of the gods, and the daughters of men, an Afro-Asiatic interpretation of Genesis 1 and 11 by Dr. Modupe Oduyoye. And if you have not seen the interview that I have with him, he is one of our, preeminent scholars. He's a biblical scholar and linguist, and he's also a pastor, so he is a Christian. But he grounds his Christianity in African cultures and languages, and a very important scholar, still living with us. I think around 85 years old currently. So he states in this book, starting on page 102, the problem, and he's trying to answer the question, why do so many groups in Africa and in Arabia essentially have dialectical variations of the same name? And so what certain scholars would argue is that, well, that was just probably a common name that people would name these folks. But what he argues is that that these are just variants over thousands of years of the same ancestral, community who ultimately are known by these different dialectical variations of the word. So he says the problem with this way of explaining the Apiru phenomenon is, how did a far-flung sociological class become known over a wide area by words that are philologically identical? What is the social, therefore human background of the wide dispersion of the philologically related terms? Talking about Hebrew, Habiru, Arab, Fulani, because the root of Fulani is Fula, and in other variations is a Pere, a Poro in some areas. Then you have the Afar, etc., etc. So he says, how does a tribe Israel emerge from the non-ethnic sociological class? A study of sedentarization among the Fulani nomads of West Africa shows how nomads attack settlements and take over power when opportunity offers. Here's a totally different text reaffirming the same thing, that the Fulani are just like any other nomadic pastoral group, always raiding, always invading, kidnapping, and the like. So this is how you get slavery in many parts of West Africa and the like, because of individual groups like the Fulani and their variants. So it happened in ancient Ghana, it happened in Mali, it happened in Songhai. The last such occurrence was the jihad of Uthman Dan Fodio, through which the Fulani took over the government of the Hausa states in Nigeria of the 19th century. So a lot of us really got to get into African history, because a lot of y'all mythologizing a lot of stuff here. And these Fulani were no benevolent people. These were nomadic, raiding, robbing groups, and they caused so much destabilization in West Africa that we were not able to have a united front once the Europeans came and started kidnapping and bringing people across the waters. But that's another conversation for another day. They all presuppose that these people were called by a nickname, fugitives, receivers of rations, or the dusty people, and that they did not call themselves by any such name. It is, however, very unlikely that the same nickname was given and maintained for almost a millennium in many different regions and by people speaking different languages, even when this name no longer applied to their way of life. To their activities at the time. These difficulties are eliminated as soon as we cease to think of the Haparu as a class in society and regard them as a people. Some documents suggest that the word Haparu should be applied to an ethnic group, and others almost compel us to accept this interpretation, et cetera, et cetera. So these are various variations of the BR ethnic group. So you have a Paru in the ancient Egyptian, you have the Pul, Pulo, and these are, variations of the Fulani word. So they're also known as the Pul. And then in Saudi Arabia, it's the Faleti. And then you have Eber, Bar, Barzet, other variations of the same root, Fula, Afar, Afri, Ifrin. These are like parts of the Berber groups, Afarasis, Afaria, Falasha, Gafar, Gafir, and then Gafar. Both of these having a God prefix. You see this same word attached to the same people, and they all have the same, lifestyle. And so what he shows in his book here is the travel of the Haparu. And so one point of clarity that the author, Dr. Modupe Odioye, he argues is that originally, based on the kind of cattle that emerged here, that the original Haparu folks came out of India, and that these Indian folks merged and over time, dealt with them, and then came here, and of course mingling with the Africans, and they just been going back and forth throughout this same path for hundreds of thousands of years. And so this is why you see the variations of the same name of the same people, the Bororo, in this way, Abore, Fulbe, Pulo, Fula, Pul, Haparu, Habari, Aparam. They all come from here, and they've been going back and forth over these years. And remember, they were going around raiding and stealing women. So you're going to find variations because they're having children with these people. So now they become this mixed race group of folks all up and down the Middle East and in India and in North Africa and in West Africa. And so in Genesis, Habel was a Roesh son, a feeder of sheep and goats, yada, yada, yada. And, so this is some of your so-called Libyan variations, and these are your Fulani here. These are Fulani and Wadobe women, yada, yada, yada. You see them in the ancient Egyptian literature. These are your Afar people, more on the northeast side of Africa. And this was the slide that you saw earlier. But this is an article. I don't know if it's still up, but I have a copy of it. It's titled Fulani Mbororo and then the Oke Ogun farmers. Endless class. It's supposed to be clash over farms because the Fulani, their cattle keeps raiding the Oke Ogun farmers. And there's been war between them. And you find the same issue that was expressed in the ancient Egyptian between the mythology of Osiris and Seth, and then of course the same thing in the Bible with Ogun, which is pronounced as Chayin in the Hebrew, and Abel, which is a variation of the same root that gives us Hebrew and Fulani and Bororo. And so it's been the same issue for thousands of years. Farmers and nomadic pastoralists clashing because farmers are taking up all the good land and the pastoralists have to feed their cattle. And so their cattle comes in and it becomes a national security issue when, the cattle eats up the cattle eats up the food of the farmers. And so there's been wars, and this is as late as 2010. They're still clashing in northern Nigeria for the same reason. Excuse me. And so, these are, and so we went through this part already. So I'll end that share on that note. But yeah, see, I got me going over my time. I meant for this just to be an hour, but hopefully, certain things will be put together in a very serious way that you can understand. So that's why I'm writing the book, so I could put all this history together, with all the source and citations, so that people get a better understanding. Because fragmented conversations, they'll be missing certain things, and I have tons more that helps to put these things into perspective. So let me see. He says the golden bow is an excellent in understanding the transitioning of superstition, magic, religion, and science in the quest to produce and protect a feel and sense of control over these things. Indeed. Let me see. Fulani are the source of issues. Conscious, gone full anti-African. Obviously, he hasn't been paying attention. Everybody wants a steak, but no pastoralism crazy. No. This is taking a cringy anti-African turn, which is clear that you don't know me too well. Brother Ifatunde says, remember the BRRB metathesis process for Arabs. Exactly. All the word Arab refers to are a group of nomadic people who used to cross back and forth in the valleys in Arabia. It's just the metathesis of the same BR root. They're all the same. And so no, this is not anti-African, it's anti-illusion. Exactly. Like people have, romantic notions of history and don't really study this stuff. Let me see. Asami cutting these folks who romanticize Africa deep with the truth. Not sure how the armor is bleeding. Indeed. He says, I don't think this talk lets Europeans off the hook for industrializing slavery, but it does illuminate our role. Now, we're not a meat puppet, but our people played a role. Yeah. Like, if you want to get to the truth of stuff, you got to let go of, certain beliefs. You just have to delve in and accept the facts of history as it is. And, there's just no way around it. And that's okay. We can forgive it and know better as history cycles. Exactly. So this is why you got to understand why certain groups in Africa can't get together. Why there's no African unity, because of these different. It's a clash of different, modes of production and subsistence strategies and values. Us over here in the diaspora, we understand collectively that we're all quote unquote African people. But very few of us have really delved into the history of Africa and understand how there was multiple issues going on simultaneously to destabilize Africa and put it in the condition that it is in today. And so with that said, I do appreciate each and every one of you for rocking with me this evening. Check us out on tomorrow. And I didn't add the hold on one second. Let me just go ahead and add this because we have another show on tomorrow. And I'm just going to put the thumbnail up now. And so we're premiering the interview that I have with Brother Hondo Solomon, who wrote He's the author of the Polygamous Papers. So we're going to be talking about polygamy tomorrow. Its history, its purpose, pros and cons. And so this is going to be a very interesting conversation, and it is the first of many in a series of interviews and conversations regarding polygamy that we will have on this particular channel. So with that said, I wish y'all a good night. Y'all be blessed. Thank you for your support, and don't forget to like the video and share and subscribe if you have not subscribed. With that said, I am out. Peace.